chat. Yep. Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. If you follow this next guest on Instagram, you'll know what great things she's doing. I had the pleasure of meeting her about 3 years ago when I interviewed her for the very first Truth About Weight Loss Summit. And I don't know, we have not been in touch, which shame on me, because she's just lovely and she's brilliant and she's beautiful and she's a wealth of information, especially when it comes to toxicity in diet, toxicity in the environment, toxicity in products. She really is a know-it-all in that aspect. Please welcome Dr. Vivian Chen. It's so nice to see you again. I'm sorry I let 3 years go by and haven't been in touch.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Chef AJ. It's such an honor to be here. I love your work. Thank you for your kind words. And I feel exactly the same way about you. Thank you for all the amazing work you're doing in your community.
Because I just remember interviewing you on the summit. You were just so easy to talk to. It was like talking to a friend, but a really smart friend, because you know a lot about this subject and you share it on Instagram with just, I mean, I just love looking at your product reviews, and it's just really, it's like the go-to for, you're like the Google for that on your Instagram page.
Oh, thank you. It's kind of transpired from having to do it for myself, right? And I thought if I was researching products for myself, why not share it with anyone who wants to have a look, and it might save them time. And yeah, it's kind of grown from that. So yeah, it's a true honor to be able to share this with so many people.
Yeah, that's fantastic. How did you first get interested in this?
Well, it's a long story, but to shorten it, I had symptoms of toxicity, which I didn't know was because of environmental toxins, because I didn't learn about this at medical school. So my background is that I went to medical school in London.
And you were second in your class.
Oh yeah.
I remember hearing that on a podcast.
Yeah, so I don't say that to show off, but it's more kind of just to say that it's not that I was napping all through medical school. I didn't learn any of the vital information that they were teaching me. It's just that it literally, this information was not in the medical curriculum when I went to school. And so I went through medical school, and then I practiced as a conventional medical doctor, firstly in internal medicine and then family practice. And basically from when I was an internist and all through my practice as a family doctor, I was so tired all the time. I was literally connected to a coffee trip. If I could have had coffee IV, I would have. I was tired all the time. I had acne. I was bloated all the time. A lot of anxiety, insomnia, and I went to my own doctors. They couldn't help me. They tried to help me. You know, I feel like all my doctors were lovely. They were trying to be helpful. But again, like me, they didn't learn about environmental toxicity at school, so they didn't know what to look for. And so all the labs that they ran were normal. So they told me I was normal. So I continued living like that, thinking that was my norm. And I think so many people do, until my daughter was born and she stopped feeding completely. She had this at the time undiagnosed cow's milk protein allergy, which she was getting the cow's milk protein from my breast milk, and because I was consuming dairy, and it passed through to her. It caused inflammation in her gullet to the point where if she fed, it caused her intense pain. So she would come off the breast immediately, arch her back, cry, and no doctors could diagnose her, including myself. So she had to be hospitalized and tube fed when she was 8 weeks old. And that was the moment when everything changed for me. Like, that changed my trajectory in my career, in my life, everything from that point, because, you know, that intense guilt of not being able to help your daughter when you spent your entire life wanting to help other people, right? The one person I wanted to help the most, I couldn't help through all those years of training, really brought a lot of questions into my mind of like, did I miss anything during my medical school training? And I started digging into the research, and, you know, luckily I did have the rigorous medical training behind me to allow me to read complex scientific research and papers. And I found a paper that talked about cow's milk protein allergy, and she fitted the symptoms exactly. So, and that paper was from 1983. So it's not even like a new study. It just didn't make its way into my medical curriculum. Anyway, to cut a long story short, she got better, and it started my journey onto kind of looking into nutrition, what else I missed at medical school. And a big component of that was environmental toxins.
You know, it's interesting. You said a lot of doctors aren't aware of environmental toxins. A lot of doctors aren't aware that food is toxic.
Exactly. And it's a shame because these things are really getting at the root of health issues, right? I like to think of our body as a plant. And, you know, when you're thinking about food, your lifestyle, you're getting at the soil, you're making the soil healthy so that plant can thrive. Whereas conventional medicine mainly looks at the leaves. We want to, like, you know, make the leaves look pretty by trimming it and doing things to the leaves, but we should really be also looking at the root. I'm not saying there's no merit at all at looking at the leaves, right? We need rapid symptomatic control in some cases, and conventional medicine is excellent at delivering acute care. It is absolutely life-saving. But when it comes to chronic health conditions, we need a different paradigm.
Right. Are you still in touch with number one from your graduating class?
No, I'm not anymore. But I know that he's still practicing as a conventional, I think, cardiologist.
Wow. So hidden causes of weight gain. You know, when we think of weight gain, I think a lot of people really think the food first.
Yes. And that's great. But I feel like a lot of people get the concept of what is it about food incorrect, right? So when they look at food, they think about calories, right? Or carbs, is this high? You know, the two common questions I get anyway in my coaching practice is, is it high carb? Is it high calories, right? And I think they're missing the point when they're looking at food like that. So we know now that weight loss is not just about calories in, calories out. It's so much more beyond that. And you do an amazing job hosting the Weight Loss Summit every year. I love tuning into that and being part of that. And, you know, you're looking at the complexity of weight gain, which is so much more important in getting to those root causes again. And so the quality of your diet, what food you're putting on your plate matters more than just counting calories.
Absolutely. But I love the diet that you recommend because I eat one just like you.
Right, exactly. I love your recipes, and I love that you can make oil-free cooking so delicious, right? Which is, a lot of people think that food would taste bland or horrible without oil, but there are some very clever ways like what you have up your sleeve to help people.
And people, what I'm more concerned about is the taste, because we know that we can make food taste delicious without oil. And there may be a period where people have to adjust to a lower fat diet, but now there's just so much of the opposite information being distributed by even sometimes plant-based doctors that oil is healthy. It's necessary for brain health. It's necessary for heart health. And people get very confused.
It's super confusing. I agree with you. And, again, there is nuance there in terms of like what type of oils. Some oils are definitely better than others. So it's kind of like, are you swapping a better oil for a worse oil? Maybe that's why you're experiencing an improvement, but maybe there will be even more improvement if you just swapped it out with broth instead, right? Or applesauce.
Yeah, absolutely. So these other hidden toxins in environmental things or products, how are we supposed to know about these? Because most people aren't really informed consumers a lot of times with these.
Yeah, it's a super overwhelming area, I feel. When I first started looking into it, I was completely overwhelmed and quite honestly very upset and angry, because I always thought that the regulations were there to protect us and what's on our shelves is safe for us to consume because it's been through testing to make sure that it's safe for humans. But that is nothing like the truth, because currently we have around 85,000 chemicals that are registered for use with the EPA. And, several thousand of these are what's known as high frequency. So these are used frequently in our everyday products. And only a very small percentage have ever been tested for human safety. So we're talking about thousands of chemicals that are being used that we're exposed to frequently every day, that are not tested for human safety, that we don't even know if they're safe in humans. And in fact, lots of animal studies and observational studies are coming out showing that many of these environmental toxins can have long-term health consequences, one of which is affecting our metabolic health, which then can lead to weight gain. So I think the first thing I want to say is please don't feel overwhelmed. I think the realization is perhaps the most important first step. And the fact that you're here listening to this and becoming aware of this as an issue is an amazing first step. So I just want to say a big, well done for even being here and listening to Chef AJ's show, because you're making a big difference to your life just by being here and then realizing this. And then we can take steps slowly, right? I like to think of it as a staircase, right? So we take one step up that staircase at a time. We're not going to, fly up the staircase in one day. And if you try to do that, it's very difficult and very overwhelming. And some people they put their hands up and say, I can't do it. I'm just, it's just too much for me. I can't do it. Whereas if you look at it and break it down as one step at a time, it's a lot more attainable. So, the first step I always look at is our food, right? That's where I normally start, because we eat, around 3 pounds of food a day. And our food is a big source of exposure to these environmental toxins. So if we can do something there to change our exposure, we can then change the trajectory of our health, even if you changed nothing else, right? So, and I think that's why a plant-based diet works so well across so many chronic conditions, because a plant-based diet is naturally lower in a lot of these environmental toxins, because plants are at the bottom of the food chain, and a lot of these environmental toxins concentrate up the food chain. So the higher up the food chain you go, the more concentrated they become, because if you imagine a cow has consumed how many tons of grass throughout its lifetime, right? Even if it's grass-fed. And we know that in our soil, in our water, there's pesticides, there's heavy metals, right? These are accumulating in the body of that animal across the lifetime. And by the time it ends up on your plate, you're consuming a very concentrated amount through just one piece.
Absolutely. You mentioned you have a coaching practice. Do you work with people all over the world? I'm guessing it's probably virtually. And what does that entail?
Yes. So I actually deliberately decided not to get my medical license in the US, and instead spent my time coaching people back to health using lifestyle measures and using, nutrition, reducing toxic load. So it entails a very kind of detailed intake. Like usually my first consults are 1.5 hours, and I literally go through their diet, their history, their previous exposures, and then we work out a plan of what to eat, what products to switch out. And sometimes before the pandemic, I used to go to clients' homes and look around their homes and try and help them reduce toxins there as well. I also, because I'm so busy in my practice now, I put together a course, because some people are very motivated and they don't need a one-on-one. So I actually put information about how to reduce toxins into a course as well. So that's a lot more accessible.
Yeah, that sounds great. How long of a course is it?
So it's a 6-week course, and I go through each week. So the first step to reducing toxic load is always to reduce exposures, right? So I take people through how to reduce exposures, step-by-step approach again. and then focusing on how to support the body's natural detox organs work better. Because the truth is, we, even despite best efforts at reducing exposure, there's always going to be exposures, right? We live in the real world now. So I think it's important to support our detox organs like our liver, our kidneys, so that whatever we do encounter, we can eliminate efficiently, and we don't need to become anxious and stressed out about exposures, right? A lot of people on this non-toxic living journey become a little bit too worried about exposures, like they won't eat out anymore. They carry, their food and water with them everywhere. And that in itself, the stress of it can be a source of toxin on the body, I feel. So I take a very pragmatic approach. Reduce exposures where you can. Don't overly kind of obsess and stress about it. And then try to support your body's detox organs.
A lot of people that we're watching are ethical vegans, so they buy products that are cruelty-free, not tested on animals, don't have animal ingredients. But does that guarantee it's non-toxic just because it's vegan and cruelty-free?
No, that doesn't. It's a completely different issue, and I totally respect that. That we don't want to torture animals for our benefit, but it doesn't mean that it's non-toxic. So I like to use a resource on the Environmental Working Group website. So if you Google Environmental Working Group Skin Deep Database, they have a huge database of ingredients, and each of those ingredients are rated from a 1 to 10, 1 being safe, non-toxic, 10 being toxic. And I try to find products that kind of have ingredients around, between 1 to 2. A 3 is acceptable, but anything above a 4, I try to avoid.
Nice. Tanya, who's watching live, says, how do we take your course? Is it on your website?
Yes, so I can give you the link. It's on my website. It's closed for enrollment right now because I take my students through it live, so I can support everybody in the Facebook group and through live Q&A. So it's on my website. It's due to open again in January next year.
Oh, January. Is there like a hierarchy of toxins? Like, is there something we should all be looking out for to really like exclude permanently? I mean, I know that a lot of people aren't going to throw out their stuff, but next time they make a purchase, is there something to say, like, at least if you're not going to go all the way, like, we say if people aren't going to be vegan, like, at least, don't have dairy. Is there something in the toxic world that we really should just say, this is non-negotiable? We can't have this in our products anymore.
I absolutely love that question. And it's a great question because it kind of depends on what your own health circumstances are like, right? Because if you have a health condition, for example, if you have thyroid conditions, then you need to be more careful with things like PFAS. PFAS is perfluoroalkyl substances. These are the non-stick coating on, for example, Teflon pans. And then it can also be found in our water now because of industrial dumping. It's widely used in waterproofing, stain-proofing. So PFAS can really affect, it's been shown in studies to affect thyroid function, and flame retardants also have been shown to be associated with thyroid conditions. So if you have a specific health condition, then there may be certain toxins that you absolutely should hone in on. But if you don't, I feel like the best way to go about non-toxic living in a non-overwhelming way is like what you just said. When you next run out of a product, you look for a better one to replace it with, right? We don't need to toss out tons of products that, we don't need to waste these products. Like money is important, like finances are important. It can be a stress for us too. So if you don't have a health condition, it's okay to use up whatever you have, right? Our detox organs can eliminate whatever we're exposed to, and then just look for a better product. On the website that I just mentioned, they have a list of vetted products, so you can look there, or I have products that I use on my website as well. So that's a great way, but I feel like food, water, and air, those are the 3 foundations that we should set. And then the other products come whenever you run out.
That makes sense. Food, water, and air, because those are the three. I mean, we die without those three.
Right. And we are exposed to the most toxins through those three methods, right? Because we breathe 11,000 liters of air a day, right? We don't realize how much that is. And sadly, because of, traffic, cars and things like that, our air is heavily polluted now. And gosh, with the wildfires as well, it's heartbreaking. So yeah, the air, PAH, for example, can be an obesogen, like it can be linked to weight gain. And we don't realize that because we're breathing these things in. They don't really smell like very much. So it's not like, oh, it smells really bad, I'm going to do something about it. So it's kind of invisible, but it's just there in the background. And then water equally. I just mentioned PFAS, the nonstick coating compound can be found, but prescription medications have been found in our water, right? Because currently water utilities, they are only required to monitor for 93 pollutants, only 93, when we have thousands of pollutants that are now in our environment, most of them man-made. And so, we have to kind of take that role of advocating for our own health, because the regulations are not quite there yet to protect us.
Things like makeup and hair dye, how toxic are they generally?
Well, so makeup can be a source of phthalates. Phthalates are these chemicals that are, there are two purposes. One is it fixes things to you, so it can fix scent. Anything that smells nice usually has phthalates, or it makes hard things flexible. So think about your shower curtains, those squishy rubber ducks that we give our children at bath times. Those are sources of phthalates. And phthalates are probably one of the most toxic group of endocrine disruptors. And for those people who don't know what endocrine disruptors are, these are compounds that can interfere with our own hormones. So in our body, we have hormones like thyroid, which regulates our metabolism. We have insulin, which regulates blood sugar control. And then we have sex hormones that regulate our fertility. And phthalates can interrupt all of these systems. So then, it can manifest as weight gain. It can manifest as fertility issues, or it can manifest as thyroid issues, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, or insulin resistance. So there are so many different symptoms that can come out of endocrine disruption. And endocrine disruption really underlies, I feel, a lot of people's weight struggles.
So this is probably too technical of a question, and I might not even understand your answer, but who just started discovering this, and how do these cause weight gain? And do they cause weight gain? And let's say, for example, somebody was eating like the most perfect plant-based diet and had a lot of these endocrine disruptors and chemicals. They could still gain weight because of this? Because I'm just confused how this happens.
Yes, it's really interesting how it all came about. So there was a book called Silent Springs that first brought the kind of role of environmental toxins to the scene, I think back in 1970s. And then more and more research has been done on it ever since, but not a lot of funding has been dedicated to it because it's just, I don't know, it's one of those things I can't explain why. But in 2013, I think there was a real turning point. So the National Toxicology Program put together a workshop, enlisted the help of lots of different experts. They sat together and reviewed all the available literature evidence for environmental toxins. And they found real biological plausibility to the fact that environmental toxins can impact our health. And at the time, they focused on type 2 diabetes and obesity. And so because of that, there was a lot more funding dedicated to it. So in the last 10 years, we've really seen an explosion of studies being done because a lot more money has gone into this area. A lot of the studies so far have been on animals, And a lot of studies have been observational, meaning, they're taking groups of people, measuring their exposure and linking it to disease. And that's one kind of criticism from many of my conventional colleagues who don't want to buy into this non-toxic living, because they say, well, there's no scientific study to prove cause and effect, right? But in order to do that, we'd have to make a study where we deliberately giving a group of people what we suspect to be toxins. And then we have to follow them up for years and years, because don't forget, we're not talking about acute poisoning, right? Acute poisoning is easy. Like you give someone a high dose of a chemical, they have symptoms right away, like mercury toxicity, acute poisoning. When back in the days when I work on awards, if I broke mercury SFIG, the blood pressure machine, the whole ward was shut off, right? And we had to test everybody's blood levels. But what I'm talking about is not that. It's the accumulative daily exposure, right? And that you may not see an effect of that for years or maybe generations, right? So there's another researcher called Bruce Blumberg, Dr. Blumberg, out of Southern California, University of Southern California, who first discovered a compound called tributyltin, which is used to paint the outside of ship. When he exposed mice to this compound, pregnant mice to this compound, the offspring had an increased risk of weight gain. And then not only the direct first line of offspring, the offspring's offspring also had this increased risk. So there are these developmental windows which are critical if you're exposed to these certain chemicals. They can actually switch on and off genes, which we can then pass on to future generations. So, when they say obesity runs in the family, of course, we know there are definitely genetic, influences there, but this could actually also be influencing our epigenetics as well.
Are there tests that people can take to see how toxic their tissues actually are?
Yes, so there are tests, but what test is a very important question to ask, right? Because many of these toxins, when they're chronic exposures, they end up being stored in our body because during an acute exposure, our body recognizes these things as not being good for us. So it tries very hard to get rid of it ASAP to save our lives. And, it's utilizing our detox organs. And then whatever is not being eliminated through our detox organs, it tries to find ways to hide it so that it doesn't hurt us anymore. And one of the areas it tries to hide it in is our fat tissues. So the fat is usually thought of as inert, right? So it's like kind of hidden, it's like the storage, right? So that's where the body hides a lot of these toxins. And also many toxins are what's called lipophilic, meaning they love fat. So they seek out fat and they attach to fat and they kind of hide out there. So if we're looking at chronic exposures, so a lot of research studies are done with fat biopsies. So they actually take biopsies of fat from people and then analyze it for body burden of these environmental toxins. But some doctors utilize provoked testing. So they use something that binds to these toxins and pull them out of tissues, and then they measure it in your urine. But usually, if you're not talking about acute exposures, like acute lead poisoning, then measuring blood levels is not super useful. So you want to be looking at tissue burden rather than blood.
Is this something that any doctor can order, or many doctors not familiar with these tests? Like
if they've had training and they've studied it, they should be able to, they have access to all of these tests. Whether they know how to use it or when to use it, that's up to their training, right? So if you look for a doctor who's been through what is it called? There's a integrative medicine fellowship in Arizona, headed by Dr.
Andrew Weil. I've heard quite a few of his graduates on the show.
Oh, great. Yeah, he's amazing. I love him. He's basically the father of integrative medicine. Most of those doctors are well versed with toxicity and they talk about and they've been trained in it.
So somebody has these tests and they find out they're highly toxic. And what do they do? How do they know where to start? Do they just hope that they outlive their toxicity and die from something else?
Well, so it depends on what toxins you're talking about, right? There's specific treatments for each one, but going back to our bodies are so clever, right? This is what I want to point out is that we have this innate just wisdom in our body. Like we've been made perfectly to have detox organs to help us. So if we can support these detox organs, it almost doesn't matter what toxin you're talking about. If you're supporting all of your detox mechanisms, then slowly over time, as provided you're not exposed continuously, right? If you're constantly being exposed, then your body's still going to be overwhelmed. But if you've reduced your exposure and you've supported your detox organs, then slowly these toxins are going to come out of your body. And that's the good news, is that, you know, it's not something that we are doomed. We can absolutely do something about it. And that's why it's so important to talk about it.
You know, it's interesting with hearing about your daughter's story. I mean, dairy is a toxin, and most people are, I'm not talking about breast milk, but most children have cow's milk at a very early age. Many pediatricians say that a parent would be negligent to not give them dairy products. So it's like we start out in toxicity.
Right. And dairy in a lot of studies have been shown to be a very concentrated source of these environmental toxins we're talking about. So PCB, for example, PCB is an ingredient or chemical that was previously widely used for, you know, sealant, for manufacturing, basically like electronics, things like that. And it's in our environment. And it's known as a persistent organic pollutant because it doesn't break down. It doesn't disappear. Once it's in our environment, it's just there. It's in our soil. And so because it's in the soil, it gets into the grass. Even if it's grass-fed, the cows are getting into their body. And PCB is lipophilic. It likes fat. So it concentrates in the fatty parts of the animal. And that's going to be dairy. And then cheese is also cheese, butter. They're very high sources of these environmental toxins.
Right. Yeah. That, you know, it's just interesting that doctors don't know this about dairy, you know?
It's very sad. Yeah. And I've racked my brains trying to work out why it is. It's, you know, when I first read about all this stuff, I was really upset. You know, I felt like somebody cheated me out of my medical education by not teaching me about all of this. It's right there in the scientific research. So why do I not know about why it's not translated into my medical textbooks? Because it could be helping so many people. You know, I used to actually, part of my internal medicine training, I did a stint in dermatology. So I was a resident in dermatology for a year, during which time I treated the most severe eczema patients, the most severe acne patients. Never once did I talk about dairy, right? And dairy is such a big culprit in both of those conditions because it can contribute to both acne and eczema. Luckily, there's more research. Like recently, I think a year ago, there was a large study published in JAMA about how dairy can be a contributor to acne. And so now more and more dermatologists are talking about it. But when I first talked about this on my Instagram, when I first started 4 years ago, I had conventional dermatologists question my training, like, do you know what you're talking about? Did you even spend any time in dermatology for you to be sharing all of this quackery and misinformation? Even though it was from, you know, scientific studies. So,
you know, it's funny, people are asking about soy. People are worried about soy, but yet they're not worried about milk. I'm not saying these people, but people that you talk to.
Oh yeah. And again, that is misinformation, right? There are lots of people, bloggers, out there on the web, on the internet telling people soy can give you man boobs. Soy contains estrogen. It can increase your estrogen, because they don't understand the nuance of the human body, and they've just read one single animal study in a rat, soy, like concentrated soy isolates, right? I'm not even giving rat soy milk or tofu. We're giving them these artificial compounds, and it caused these side effects. And there's so much nuance in nutrition. And so yeah, soy is every time I show soy on my stories, I always get questions about why I'm consuming it and why I'm not scared.
Funny. Do you think you'll ever write a book so that all this information will be in one place for us?
I would love to. Yeah, one day I would love to.
That would be great. Let me see. I'm going to check the chat if there's any questions. Yeah, it'd be good if you could certify products. I would love to just have a whole list of of every category, what to buy, what sunscreen, what moisturizer, Dr. Chen approved. I think or create your own line of everything.
Yeah, I would love to. One day maybe. It was I think certifying products is what I've been doing so far. And yeah, one day when I have more time, I would love to look into because then I have more control over it. My worry always is that, when I certify one product, maybe 2-3 years later, it's bought out by a big brand. I don't know what they're doing to it. I have to look at their practices again. So yeah, having control of your own products would be great.
That'd be nice, like Dr. Chen's line of products. I would definitely buy.
Thank you. Well, I actually have on my website, I already have listed out product recommendations. So you can take a look there.
Yep. Gina says, could you talk about the safety of silicone? Because silicone bakeware is very popular, or things like the Silpats. Are those okay? Or do those have toxicity?
Yeah, so it's nuanced again. At low temperatures, silicone is fine. So I do use silicone ice cube trays, things like that, but I don't use it in baking unless I know exactly what's gone into that silicone, because there's been studies that show that at high temperatures, certain silicone can release compounds like siloxane. So general rule for me is use it at low temperatures, but not at high temperatures.
And what do you consider low temperature? Because it says on it that it's safe to 450.
Yeah, I know. So I don't bake with it. I don't cook with silicone. I only use it for freezing things, basically, and bags. So I use it for, I freeze or store food in bags instead of plastic. It's silicone bags in my fridge. So that's low temperature. But anything where I'm heating it, I don't use.
Oh my God, you're killing me. Don't say that.
I'm sorry.
I mean, it's just it's so hard in this world, to be 100% organic and it's like a full-time job to do.
I agree. Well, you don't have to be 100%. That's the beauty of it, right? Because your body is very forgiving. We abuse our bodies so much.
People smoke and they live to their, to ripe old age.
Exactly, right? So you absolutely don't have to be 100%, right? I mean, Chef AJ, given your diet with being so perfect, you're allowed to use silicone for baking once in a while.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, things like Instant Pots and air fryers, how worried do we have to be about those?
Instant Pot is great. Yeah, Instant Pot is all stainless steel, so that's great. And air fryer, it depends on the coating, right? So if there is non-stick coating inside, that could be an issue. So when you're cooking with it, sometimes it can aerosolize and be in your air. And then if the food is actually touching it, that can get, the PFAS compounds can get into your food. So I know Breville has a stainless steel inside air fryer that also doubles up as an oven.
Oh, great, because that's the one I have. Yay!
Oh, yeah. So you already know. That one is a good one for air frying.
That is fantastic. Do people have to be worried about canned products if it's a BPA-free can, like salt-free tomatoes or salt-free beans?
Yeah, that's a great question. So BPA-free can still contain alternative replacements like BPF and BPS. So it's important to ask the brand, if you're really attached to that brand, maybe ask the manufacturer like, hey, does it contain any other of the related compounds like BPF, BPS? Because those have been shown in studies to have the same endocrine disrupting effects as BPA. I try to buy glass, and for beans, it's so cheap to cook your own, right? So I batch cook it in my Instant Pot, and then I freeze them in my silicone bag. So after they've cooled down, I freeze them so they're like flat like that. So then I can break it into chunks easily and just like dump that into my cooking. I know it takes time and a little bit of time and organization to do that, but I think it's well worth it. I still use BPA-free cans sometimes. It's not always easy to avoid it 100%. But for example, Jovial is a brand that they use glass, and they have glass chickpeas, different beans. So I try to buy those, but they can be expensive because they're glass.
What bothers me is that we have to go to all this effort to search out toxic-free products. Why don't the companies just not put these toxins in the first place? Other countries, they don't do that.
Exactly, right? And it's all about, I think, the bottom line, that their profit. And what I have observed, though, which is great news, is that these companies, because they follow the money, they follow our consumer choices, right? So when we tell them, you know what, if you're going to continue using BPA in your cans, I'm just going to go to this brand which uses glass. They listen, because when they start seeing their profit drop, they listen. So that's why we're seeing all these brands change over to non-toxic ingredients. And in Costco, for example, I walk in and there's so many organic choices now, which is incredible. And it's because consumers are demanding it. So every dollar you spend is telling these companies, like, I'm not standing for your nonsense anymore. I'm going for a better product, and if you're not changing, then I'm not going to support you anymore.
Like in law, they always say, innocent until proven guilty. And it's like, it should be the other way around. It should be unsafe until proven safe. Whereas it's like, they're just allowed to do this. And then they wait for us to get cancer and say, oh yeah, sorry,
Exactly. Look at glyphosate, right? It's
safe.
Roundup.
Roundup. I mean, it's just like, I don't understand, because other countries have much stricter rules with these things.
Yeah. So I trained in the UK, I grew up in the UK. The rule in the EU is they assume something is not safe until there's some safety data. They're still not perfect, but as an example, for cosmetics, they've banned 1,100 chemicals to be used, whereas in the US, only 11 have been banned, right? That's a tenfold difference. So particularly in the US, we really have to look out for ourselves. And that's where, going into the research yourself and looking, not just listening to like the regulators. I wish we could just listen to them and take what they say as truth, but, usually it's where, in the research, it first shows evidence, and then slowly it translates to regulatory changes many years down the line.
Right. How much does diet help? Because I'm thinking I'm pretty perfect in diet. Really, I'm like an A-. I mean, there's very little indiscretions, but I'm not perfect with all the things that you talk about. I could do better, and I'm going to do better. And I do better with each purchase because I'm a frugal person and I don't like to throw out makeup. But every time I replace it, I make sure. But like, can my diet protect me against using silicone bake pans in a nonstick pan, or is it still really, is it something I should worry about, or is it more important if somebody has, something like cancer or an autoimmune disease, to be more careful?
Yeah, 100% your diet protects you, 100%. There's no doubt about it. That's why I say the foundations are your diet, food, and water, right? Because if you get your diet right, there are two aspects that you're changing simultaneously just by adopting a plant-based diet. One is that you're reducing your exposure, which is great. And the other is you're supporting your detox organs naturally, right? So in my detox course, I actually give the specifics, like step-by-step of how to support your gut, your liver. But, in broad strokes, we want fiber, right? Fiber actually binds onto a lot of these toxins and bring them out of our bodies without them ever being absorbed, right? So fiber is so important. And what's a plant-based diet rich in? Fiber, right? So it's a naturally detoxing diet. A plant-based diet, it is your ultimate detox diet. You don't need juice cleanses, right? You don't need these expensive protocols or whatever. Just go on a plant-based diet, and the antioxidants, the nutrients, the minerals that you get, they support liver detox. Liver detox is actually a very active process. It requires so many different nutrients like zinc, selenium, B vitamins, magnesium. We're getting all of this in our leafy green vegetables, nuts and seeds, in your whole food plant-based diet, which is really rich in these antioxidants and minerals that are needed for detox. So, you don't know that you're doing this, but you're actually supporting your detox organs when you eat such a clean diet and eat so many fruits and vegetables.
I'm going to hope that protects me. What effect do these toxins and these, I even heard that from Dr. Ron Weiss when I interviewed him, that like the cash register receipts are toxic to touch.
Right. So that's a source of BPA. And surprisingly, BPA can be absorbed through your skin quite efficiently. And particularly after you use something like alcohol, so hand sanitizers, which then, temporarily reduces the barrier and allows better absorption. So they've found that after using hand sanitizers, you touch your receipts, you're actually increasing the absorption much more. So receipt is a source of BPA cans, but I would say if you're looking for like that lowest hanging fruit, just reduce your exposure to plastic. Like that's going to be the first step, right, in your everyday life. So plastic water bottles, plastic in, food stored in plastic. Plastic is so bad for our environment anyway. Like fish is now full of microplastics. So microplastics are the tiny plastic, and it's been found in fish. So if you eat fish, I think they estimated in a year you're eating like a credit card worth of plastic into your body every year. We don't know fully what this means in terms of our health, but we know that microplastics are the vehicles that transport these endocrine disruptors like phthalates, BPA, into our body, right? So I don't think it's a good thing. We don't have proof yet what it does.
JL is wondering, is parchment paper safer than silicone, or does that have bad stuff in it as well?
That's what I use. Yeah. So I use parchment paper. I like this brand called If You Care. That's a good brand because it's unbleached, and it's that's what I use when I bake.
I love that. If you care, I feel like saying if you care, then go.
Right. It's a great name, right?
Yeah. So I don't know. Has your daughter been very healthy since finding out that she had a cow's milk allergy? And
yeah, touch wood. Yeah. So she had to be put on Neocate, which is a hypoallergenic formula, because it takes up to 3 weeks for dairy cow's milk protein to disappear from my breast milk. And because she was in such a bad state, I switched her, and then within a week, she was better. But then she was feeding on Neocate. And I'm wondering why she even had this weird, rare form of allergy. It was rare back then, 13 years ago, but not so rare anymore. It's more recognized now. It's like, there's always a question in my mind, like, why do people develop conditions, right? Like, what's the underlying root cause? So I dug into the research, and that's when I stumbled upon environmental toxins, because what I realized is that what these toxins are doing is that they dysregulate our immune system, right? So for example, mercury, there was a study, I mean, these are not high quality, you know, your gold standard randomized double-blind placebo trials, but you know, there's a suggestion there, right? And then I try to piece everything together. And then when the pieces fit together, that's when I think, okay, this is when I need to do something. So I came across so many different articles that linked immune dysregulation with environmental toxins. And so I started to clean out our food first, and then our air, water, and then our everyday products. And this was a journey over years, okay? I didn't do this overnight. And thankfully, she actually grew out of her allergies. So she can eat cow's milk now. I just don't let her. And she at the time, she was also diagnosed when she was, you know, I think about 1, she was also diagnosed with peanut allergy, egg. She had 4 different allergies. She's grown out of all of them now. So I'm not saying that everybody can outgrow their food allergies, but you know, I do think that these environmental toxins are confusing our immune system, and the immune system is overwhelmed, and now it just doesn't know like what's a friend, what's a foe anymore, right? It's now thinking food is bad for us when, you know, they should be attacking something else. It's just a very confused immune system. Part of that also comes down to gut health, because 70% of our immune system is in the gut. And because of the, you know, highly processed inflammatory foods that Western diets are composed of, this is having an effect on our gut health. So, yeah.
Have other parents found you since your story that maybe have gone through the same thing and didn't know what to do?
Lots, yeah. Through the podcast, a lot of people have reached out and said, oh my gosh, we went through the exact same thing. Our doctors couldn't help us. And every single one is like, we just literally shed tears over, you know, our chat, because it's such a gut-wrenching, horrible experience for any mom to experience, like, and see their daughter and their children suffer so much and then not be able to help them. That's actually why I started blogging in the first place 4 years ago, when I first moved here, because I thought, you know, if by putting my information out, I can help just a few people, it's, you know, that would be a job well done. So
yeah, no, you're helping a lot of people, and people keep asking for recommendations for this and this. They need to just go to your Instagram page or website, because it's very comprehensive what you recommend, whether it's sunscreen or cookware and things like that. But Karen and others are saying they'd love to see a product line for you, because then if we saw Dr. Chen on it, we just know it's safe, you know.
Yes, thank you. I'll work on it.
And then of course we know you'll make it vegan. So Sharon is asking, you know, they have these silicone, you know how like there's Ziploc bags that people use, you know, to store things in, and whether they're safe or not, they're not very environmentally friendly because you're using them again. So now companies have come up with like the silicone ones for permanent storage. Are those safe, since we're not cooking and we're generally putting in the pantry or the refrigerator or the freezer?
Exactly.
I imagine they're probably okay.
Yeah, those are what I use. I just use those bags instead of Ziploc bags now.
Yeah. So you have lots. I didn't know you had all these cooking ebooks, e-cookbooks on your website. They look very good.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So because of my stories, I share my food a lot to try and, you know, show people that plant-based eating is not boring. That was my initial kind of intention. And then people just wanted my recipes. And then I decided to put everything into a book. So those are my, you know, family recipes. I'm not anywhere near your level.
Listen, my level has come way down because I eat the same thing. I mean, I eat so simply. I barely do that. What kind of things do you enjoy cooking and eating?
Oh, so I'm Asian, so I have a lot of Asian recipes. And, you know, actually, Chinese cooking is very amenable to plant-based eating, because we eat a lot of vegetables traditionally and tofu, right? So we have lots of different ways to cook tofu, like in stews, and we bake them and marinate them in all different sauces. A lot of people find tofu really bland, right? And it is bland without sauces and things. So you can jazz it up. And, I make like a minced meat out of firm tofu, like the firm tofu I buy from Trader Joe's. They have this high protein, firm organic tofu. I break it up, crumble it up, and then just, put spices on it, and then bake it. And then it looks like meat, and it's got this kind of meaty texture too, without having to buy things like Beyond Meat.
Right. Well, the thing is truthfully, Dr. Chen, almost everything is bland without spices or sauces. And when people say they love meat, they don't love meat. They love the barbecue sauce.
Right.
They love sugar, fat, and salt. They love the butter on the lobster. Nobody loves
Absolutely.
just animal flesh,
Exactly.
And since you like sauces, every guest on the show, the first time they come on, gets 2 free bottles of California balsamic vinegar. So you might like flavors like the teriyaki or the curry, because those are like sauces. Monarch
Thank
says,
you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Oh, thank you. Monarch says, what about things like wax paper, aluminum foil? Are those toxic?
Well, so there's no definitive research yet. Wax depends on what type of wax. If it's paraffin wax, that's petroleum derived, you can get PAH in those, which then we don't know whether they can diffuse into and leach into food, right? So if you're vegan, you probably don't want to be using beeswax. So wax, I don't know. I would prefer like those silicone lids on things rather than wax paper. I also think that wax paper breaks down with time as well, because a lot of people say like, it starts, kind of crumbling after a while. So like that's probably when, if there are any chemicals that start to leach, right? So if you do use wax paper, definitely make sure like if it starts wearing out, just throw them in and replace them. And aluminum, there is a theory that it could leach into your food. So, if you're wrapping it, again, anything with heat, sunlight, acidity, those are the conditions that encourage leaching. So, if you're just wrapping it and it's, cold or at room temperature, it's probably not a big deal. But if you're roasting, baking, and then you're using like, acidic food like vinegar in a sauce that's coating the food, that may encourage more leaching. But it's also about your overall exposure, right? That's like such a little exposure that if you're not really exposed to aluminum and you're not predisposed, because with aluminum, we're worried about things like dementia, right? Alzheimer's. So if you're not at high risk of dementia or Alzheimer's, then maybe it's not such a big deal. And I don't want to add more stress to people's lives by saying you absolutely must not use aluminum at any time, right? It's super poisonous or whatever. It's not that. It's always about, trying to balance your overall intake and with, being practical and doing what you can within the time frame that you can without stressing yourself out so much. So instead of aluminum, I use parchment paper. So I just wrap my food up in parchment paper and bake that way. And it works quite well.
Right. Apple's asking, how do you feel about saunas for aiding in detox? Or it's just like I spin every day for an hour and I sweat. Is that enough? Because springs, I just go outside. It's a sauna. So.
Right, exactly. You don't need a sauna, just go outside.
Right.
I love sauna. And there is actually quite a few studies now that have shown sweat contains things like BPA, heavy metals, even pesticides. So sweating is a great way to detox, right? And exercise is a great way to get you sweating. Plus, exercise can boost your antioxidant. So there is an antioxidant in our body called glutathione. This compound called glutathione actually goes around and binds onto toxins and kind of ferry it out of your body. So by boosting your glutathione level through exercise, you are actually aiding detox. And then I personally use a sauna 2 to 3 times a week. There's actually also a lot of studies on cardiovascular benefit and a couple of studies on lung health benefit of sauna as well.
Cool. Let's see. I saw another question. Oh, yes, from Dina. Are there any particular foods that aid in detoxing? I'm thinking greens have to be the answer.
Oh, yeah. Lots and lots of greens. But cruciferous vegetables probably my number one choice. So cruciferous vegetables are things like broccoli, cauliflower, bok choy, daikon. Broccoli sprouts is a surprisingly concentrated source of sulforaphane, which can actually help with detox. So pound for pound, broccoli sprouts is much more concentrated source of sulforaphane, the beneficial compound, than broccoli itself. So eat both and eat a variety of these cruciferous vegetables. And then your alliums. So alliums are your garlic, onions, leeks. Those can help with detox. Your citrus, so lemon, orange, those really help, and herbs and spices. So rosemary actually helps to boost that glutathione, the compound I just mentioned, the antioxidant, and support liver detoxification. So rosemary is great. So is turmeric. Turmeric, is there anything that turmeric cannot do, right? So I have turmeric every single day, and you just want to make sure to add some black pepper to boost the bioavailability of that. Garlic is great. Just generally plants, right? Just eat lots of plants. Like, you don't have to hone in and think about specific foods if it's overwhelming. If you just think about getting lots of variety of different plants into your diet, that will be great. A great place to start.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. You like, your Instagram is where you spend most of your time. So if people want to engage with you unless they're taking your class, if they want to engage with you more regularly, would that be the best place to send them?
Yes, and then also have a newsletter. So I send a newsletter out every 1 or 2 weeks, and that's more kind of like a longer form communication, like more detailed. Instagram is like more fun, right? Like, most people don't have a high attention span on Instagram, so I have to fit everything into like 100 words. But I sometimes like to explain everything in detail. So like my newsletters will be a great place for that.
Yeah, it's just too bad that companies don't care about this more, and that we have to wait for the fallout to then do something about it. This is it's beyond my comprehension that this is allowed, or that even animal agriculture is allowed.
It truly is, but I mean, it's beyond my comprehension that even now, with the amount of evidence we have, there's still some of my colleagues who think that I am a quack. And it's just kind of like, are you even reading any scientific research if you still, are not opening your mind to this? So, I think slowly people are coming around. We have the major medical societies like the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology have a position statement on pesticides now. UCSF, down the road from me, has a white paper on pesticides. So I think slowly it's going to infuse into the medical curriculum, and more doctors will be talking about it.
And how long is it going to take?
Right, exactly. If you don't want to wait, just take control of this yourself. You can do it. You don't need a medical degree to do this. You don't need a medical degree to change your diet and just, start making a change.
Maybe you've done this, but have you ever thought of doing a video just showing all the products you use? Because your skin is flawless, and I'd love to know what you do too.
Oh, thank you so much. I may have it all saved on my stories, but you have glowing, amazing skin, Chef AJ. I think
but my biggest secret really came from staying out of the sun for the last 3 years. That has made, of course I eat well, but that has made the biggest difference. I got to be honest.
Yeah, you know what, summer right now, I get questioned a lot about sunscreen, which of course is really important to prevent sunburn, but people forget that, what is it about the sun that is so damaging, right? It's the oxidative damage, like it's causing oxidation in our cells. And what can counteract that oxidation? It's the food, right? What we're eating. So things like the compounds in green tea, fruits and vegetables that are in season magically have, properties that help us fight this oxidation damage, right? So tomatoes, watermelon, these are summer fruits. I mean, tomato is a fruit, right? So these contain compounds that actually help us fight UV damage. So it's not going to mean that you don't get burned, right? So still take care. But if you have been exposed to the sun, it can actually help mitigate some of the damage for you in terms of anti-aging.
Yeah, very good. This has just been great. You know, it's so funny. Benny said, don't worry if people think you're a quack. A lot of people think Dr. McDougall's a quack, and we know he's not. So you're
right.
a good
That's
company.
true. I really have so much admiration for Dr. McDougall and, you know, all the doctors who pioneered, you know, advocating for plant-based nutrition, right? I know they used to lecture in like little basements in case they got caught and things like that. Yeah, they're really such inspiring, amazing people.
Yeah. Oh, people are saying, can you come back? She's fantastic. Of course she can. Maybe she'll come on the summits, because I also do a GI health summit. And I know that's something you know a lot about.
Oh, yes.
I'm sure the microbiome is just as affected by all these toxins as every other system in the body.
Yeah. So that's another area of interest of mine. In fact, in my detox course, I don't even talk about detox until I've talked about the gut, because if you don't get the gut right, you can't really detox properly, because if you have leaky gut where toxins from what you're eating and your everyday things like water products is leaking into your body, then you're just constantly overwhelming your body. So yeah, gut health is so important. Thank you for doing a summit on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to ask you if you'd like to be a speaker next year on it. Can going to a place like the True North Health Center and doing a water fast aid with detoxing from some of these chemicals that people are exposed to?
I love that question. So detoxing and fasting are two separate things. And they have different purposes. I'm a fan of fasting, but we have to be clear on what benefit it brings, right? It's bringing the benefit as in we're now reducing inflammation in the body because there's not so much inflammatory foods in the body. And we're upregulating this process called autophagy. Autophagy is this process where our body actually destroys dysfunctional cells, right? It should be happening all the time in our body. And that's kind of like part of cancer surveillance, right? Our body spots a cell that's malfunctioning, destroys it, and then we don't, that cell doesn't cause us any problems. But when we are exposed to the Western lifestyle, right? Lots of stress, constant eating, autophagy is dampened down. And so that when that process doesn't work so well, then, you start to see dysfunctional cells causing problems, and it might manifest as cancer. So I'm a big fan of fasting for things like, autophagy and resetting your metabolic health, right? Metabolic health is how we process food, extract energy from our food, the controls of our satiety and hunger. So it's great for that, but it's not a detox, right? So in fact, if your detox organs are not optimally working, and then you go fast, you might experience a lot of side effects, because what's happening is, the stored toxins are now coming out of fat cells, because when you fast, the fat cells are being burnt, right? So what's stored in them starts being released into your bloodstream. Now, if you have a great detox system, those toxins will come out of your body easily, and you don't have any side effects. But if your detox organs, for example, if your liver is sluggish, is overwhelmed already from your everyday exposures, now you add in that extra burden, it's just like, okay, I'm not doing this for you anymore. These toxins then start to linger in your body, and then they can cause things like headaches, rash. So a lot of people, when they do fast, they experience headaches, rash, these side effects. It's a sign that the body is trying to get rid of excess toxins. So in a way, it's a detox in that you are releasing toxins from your body store, but fasting does not support your detox organs, because remember back to when we talked about liver detox, you need a lot of nutrients, and you're not getting those to support your liver detox during fasting. So I hope that's clear and I haven't just confused you even more, but think of fasting as great for resetting your metabolism, for autophagy, so for things like longevity, anti-aging. But detox, you actually need to eat a lot of nutrients to support your detox organs.
Elizabeth says, what about iPhones? Are these toxic too?
Well, I think social media can be toxic, right? Our emotions are, our detox organs, I think of them as an orchestra, right? So these instruments are playing a beautiful symphony for us when we're detoxing, but the conductor of that symphony, of that orchestra, is our brain. And when our brain is under stress, so if we are under a lot of stress, the brain is telling the body, hey, we are in danger here, right? Because the brain doesn't know that you're stressed out from your job, for example. The brain is just communicating stress. So the body interprets that as, oh my God, we're about to be eaten by a tiger, right? Let's down-regulate detox. So stress can be actually a factor that inhibits or impairs detoxification. And the phone can be a source of stress, I feel like, for a lot of people, because they're just on the go, right? They feel like they have to answer every single message immediately. It's very stressful. Social media is stressful, or can be stressful. And EMF, we don't know the effect of EMF, right? So the electric magnetic frequency from our phones. There are preliminary studies linking phone usage with things like schwannomas, which are benign nerve tumors in the ear for teenagers, and brain cancer. We don't know the full answer yet. So I try to practice, reducing EMF if I can, but it's part of our life now, right? So it's just things like, don't hold the phone like right next to your head like this, text, wear headsets, or put it on loudspeaker so that you're not, the phone is away from your body. Distance is your friend when it comes to EMF. You want to be as far away from your phone as possible and not have it right next to you.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Time for one more question. Dina says, what are your views on the microwave? Because I guess some of the plant-based doctors say they're okay. Not necessarily for cooking, but just reheating, things like that.
Yeah, I'm personally okay, and I use it. I know there's a lot of, I'm evidence-based, right? If, it sounds like it could be harmful, but I want to look for evidence that it's harmful before I tell people it is. And so far, there's no conclusive research to show it's harmful, right? And even some studies suggest that microwaving may preserve certain nutrients. So I don't use it a lot. I use it for reheating food. I don't use it I don't cook my food for like an hour in a microwave, for example. But yeah, I'm not against it. I just don't use it a lot because we don't have conclusive evidence yet.
Great. Thank you. It's just so wonderful talking to you. You just know so much about so many things. That's just very
Thank you so much.
Your class sounds amazing, and definitely want to get you on the summits because you are just such an expert on
it will be such a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, right. And as I said, you have not aged in 3 years.
Neither have you, Chef AJ. I have to say, you look amazing.
Well, so, you know what? It's plants.
Yeah, I agree. That's our common secret, right?
Absolutely. It's the truth, because we have family members that I don't know about you, but I have that have not aged as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely think that. Yeah. I definitely think that is a key factor for me too, right? Like most people can't believe I'm in my mid-40s. So, and it's like we're good advocates. We're good advocates for plant-based diet.
Absolutely. For nothing else, guys, do it for vanity, right? Well, thanks so much. It was so great reconnecting with you again, Dr. Chen. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back at 2 p.m. We have a bonus show today with the makers of Joy Food. They finally got their oat milk powder back in stock. It's just oats, and they're going to be making a carrot cake smoothie, chocolate chia pudding, and a spiced millet cauliflower something or other. So, next time you'll have to come back and maybe tell us what you eat and all these, because we'd love to know more about you.
Sure. Thank you everyone for listening and all your wonderful questions.
Great. And don't forget, follow Dr. Chen on Instagram. She has a wonderful page. Take care and thanks so much.
Thank you.